Welcome to Views from Stadium Boulevard. I'm Harley Johnson.
And I'm Hannah Harshey.
And we're back for another week of your favorite Michigan sports podcast. And this week...
So obviously sports haven't really happened since last week, but luckily for you guys, we still exist. And we actually have a conversation that I had with Earl Smith, who is my co-author on the Fab Five, the Scrapbook of a Revolution. So he and I talked a little bit about like the Fab Five and their legacy and why we are so drawn to them. So stick around to the end of this podcast for that. But right now we have some Hannah and some Harley for all of you guys.
Aw, that's so fun and exciting.
I love Hannah's and Harley's.
I think when we were trying to come up with ideas to talk about, we're like, did anything happen that would be like newsworthy? And Michigan basketball, like within the like hour of our discussing this, said, "Here's some news for you."
That's
and
actually
I guess the
so
biggest
true.
one, well, there was like news and I was like, wow, this is big news. But then there was another news story. I was like, wow, this is bigger news than the previous news story.
Okay, so what was the one that was like the big news?
The big news before the even bigger news?
Yes.
Okay, so the big news that dropped is that Austin Davis, Big Country, or Custard, whichever one you call him, had shoulder surgery. The like S's is like difficult for me apparently.
You got it, Harley. I believe in you.
Thank you. I guess I was like super excited to like talk today.
It's been a minute, right? Like I never talk anymore.
I don't think I speak anymore, and especially like podcasting. What's that?
Yeah.
I think this might be my only form of like social interaction. Okay, so he's expected to, well, he's already in the recovering phase, but might be expected to return to play in early October. I'm not really entirely sure like how college athletics is going to look like in October, so but having him back and having him healthy will obviously be really crucial for our team, and I think it'll just help the incoming freshmen be, have some like practice and contention, and it'll be good. I also didn't know that like elective surgery was still going on, so like when the news broke I was kind of confused as to how he got surgery.
Yeah, I mean, I am confused about that as well. He does have an in as a Michigan basketball player. I think if anyone's having an electric surgery, I can't talk either. If anyone's having an elective surgery, I feel like Michigan basketball would know the people you have to know in order to get that to happen. But yeah, hopefully he'll be fine by the beginning of the season. And then Harley, what was the bigger news that eclipsed the big news of Austin Davis's surgery?
It's funny that you say that because I've been watching Twilight the last few days.
Oh.
But
we are off our rockers.
Franz Wagner has officially returned back to us for his sophomore season at the University of Michigan. And last week we talked about how we were kind of concerned that if living with Mo during this quarantine had like any sway on like conversations about looking into the NBA, or I almost said NFL, by the way, because the NFL draft is today, but I remain true to myself. And if that would have any lean on, because Franz played professionally, as we all know, so I don't know if he thought he was ready or should explore the NBA a little bit more, but I guess as big brothers do, Franz and Mo probably talked about it, and I guess at the end of the day, Franz had to make the decision for himself, but he decided to come back and played for us, and that just means good things for Michigan basketball for the 2020-2021 season, if we have it, or if we do, if they will play in like empty arenas, I don't know, but
it's honestly,
it was some good news, honestly, in the
wonderful news. And it's honestly so important for this team because we could still potentially lose Isaiah Livers, and Franz is like, Franz was last year's Josh Christopher of constantly wondering, like, will we get him? Will we get him? It should be a game changer if we do get him. And we still have him. So I guess take all the sadness that you might still be feeling about Josh Christopher. I don't know if everyone's over that by now or if people are still, like, crying about it. But if you still have that sadness, transfer it over to the fact that we do have Franz, who we wanted so badly, and now we have him again. And honestly, if he progresses, develops at all in this offseason, like, he could be a force to be reckoned with this upcoming year.
That's so true. And also, I think, why would we want less time with a Wagner? You know, we're Michigan fans.
No, no one wants less time with a Wagner.
So, exactly. So, thank you, Franz, for staying, maybe for your own games, but also for our games as Michigan fans.
Yeah, the Franz.
Exactly.
We should, my Franz shirt isn't quarantining with me, but otherwise I maybe would wear it for nobody to see.
I was like, mine is also in quarantine. I thought about wearing it, but I was like, oh wait, it's in quarantine.
Yeah.
So perhaps not.
I've been wearing the same, like, 4 sweatshirts over and over again because I didn't pack anything to come home. I didn't think I was, like, moving home forever. I am wearing, just a fun fact, like a little OOTD, I'm wearing a tie-dyed, like, I bleached tie-dyed a sweatsuit because I saw so many people on TikTok doing it, so that's what I'm wearing today.
But were you the people that, like, dyed it with, like, toilet bowl bleach? Please tell me no.
Well, toilet bowl bleach has, like, more stuff in it than just bleach. We use, like, just straight bleach that you, like, put in your laundry if you need to bleach stuff.
Okay, because on TikTok I see, like, people get the, like, toilet bowl cleaner.
I see why you would do that because it has the little spout, so it would, like, kind of...
Yeah.
But doesn't that have more in it than just bleach? It has, like, disinfectant stuff. Well, I don't know.
Probably. It's toilet bowl cleaner. It always confused me, and people in the comments are like, that's toilet bowl cleaner. And I was like, that was my thought as well.
I'm confused about, like, the different variations of bleach. Like, if you bleach your hair, if you bleach your laundry, if you bleach the countertops, but never mind, that's not what this podcast is about. One more piece of basketball news. Our personal icon, Duncan Robinson, had a birthday. He's probably, like, 50 by now. I don't, like, he keeps getting older.
That's rude.
No, I just feel like every time I Google his age, he's, like, 4 years older than he was the last time.
When was the last time you Googled his age?
I don't know. But
I think he's 25. If I could be wrong.
See, it
so he's like a quarter of a century.
It just confuses me because he and I were in college for a lot of the same time, like 2 years of the same time, but it's because he did a 5th year of high school and he was already old for his age, and then he did old for his grade, and then he also did a 5th year of college. So, like, it just throws me off because I get so confused thinking that, like, he and I are the same age, but there have been a few other years that, like, get tacked on there to make him older than me.
And he's, like, older than me, even though we both started at Michigan at the same time.
Yeah, because he's old for his grade and had a 5th year of high school. It's very confusing. But apparently that's a thing out east, to do, like, a year of, like, another year of high school. It's pretty common.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, it's, like, I think that's what prep school is. Like, you do another year of high school to prep yourself for college. You know, when you hear about prep school, like, prep school people, I never knew what that was. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But if anyone listening to this is from New England and they're like, you're stupid, just let me know. I can take it.
Wait, Hannah.
Yeah.
You're going to be in New England, so you can just, like, research this.
Yeah. Well, no, I heard about this from someone who I met when I, like, visited Boston.
Okay, so then you can get, like, a greater sample size when you're out there.
Yeah, I'll make sure to report back.
Okay, please do.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're all concerned because all of us are confused out here.
And none of us have access to a Google search.
No, we're going old school with old research methods and old science.
But anyway, any thoughts about Duncan Robinson for his birthday?
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
I think that's
I echo that sentiment.
Okay, so I guess we'll move into probably what we're all watching and preparing ourselves for tonight, which is the NFL draft. Mostly because I don't know a lot of the coverage on it right now is talking about, like, how big this event could be, mostly because there's absolutely no content out right now in terms of sports and athletics, and I think I think there will be a lot of people tuning in, obviously, and I know we're all eagerly awaiting to see where college kids are going to be going to continue their football careers. And I know a lot of Lions fans are sweating buckets and worried about messing up. And I think that's all I really.
I mean, that's a given.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm also just really fascinated by the concept of a Zoom draft, and I just really can't wait to see how it goes. There are just so many, like, all the tweets that have been going out from their mock draft earlier this week, how a lot of them couldn't figure out how to get the Wi-Fi to work, or one coach was, like, yelling at his kids to get off their iPads because there wasn't enough bandwidth for the draft. Like, there are going to be so many technical difficulties, and I'm so excited to see all of them. Or, like, apparently a bunch of the GMs didn't know how to mute their mics, so, like, there was all the feedback, like, going back and forth.
Do you remember the, like, first, like, Zoom Blue Jeans big blue button Google Hangout thing that you had, and everyone came in and their mics were on, and it was just the worst sound, and it just it's like the equivalent of like nails on a chalkboard, but like online.
Oh, definitely. I was already like familiar with it because I've had a virtual internship before, so I used Zoom all the time, but yeah, and Google Hangouts, but yeah, it's awful when you're with a bunch of people who don't understand the concept of muting your mic.
I think I just did it from the get-go so nobody could hear like me like eating food or something.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, at any given time if I'm in a Zoom call, I'm like eating spaghetti or like Tex Mix or something.
Yeah, something crunchy. Yeah. No one needs to hear that.
Sometimes I get so into my Chex Mix, like this happened the other day when I was in class. I was just like eating my Chex Mix and like staring at it and not even looking up at the camera. And then I was like, because you forget people can see you too. And I was like, wow, I wonder if anyone's just watching me eating this Chex Mix so aggressively.
I haven't been on the video camera in like a lecture in forever.
Oh, you're lucky. All mine are discussions. So whenever I turn off my camera, they're like, Hannah, are you there?
I'm so sorry.
Okay, so this is Oh.
No. What were you saying?
Well, I think we have to discuss a really, really important topic because last year Devin Bush wore a bizarre outfit to the NFL draft, and like, first of all, I just need you guys to all remember that. Maybe Google it. Just think like, what was going on there? It was awesome though. I respect it. It was iconic. But anyway,
it was memorable.
It sure was memorable. I want to know, like, are they gonna dress up? Like, are any of them gonna have like at-home red carpets? Are they gonna be just wearing sweatpants and chilling? Or like, are they gonna like? Because a lot of them get like custom made, like designers design stuff for them to wear to the draft. At least for the NBA draft. I don't know how common that is for the NFL draft. So I just want to know how that's gonna pan out with a virtual draft.
Well, I think like for some players that don't actually go to the draft, like I know Chase was at home. And I don't think he was sitting in sweatpants. So I feel like they'll still, like, dress up because it's, like, a big night, a big occasion. But, like, are you gonna get, like, what, like, suit and tie that you left in your house when you were in high school? Or, like how all those, like, memes are saying, like, Hannah's shirts are all quarantined at her other house. So she just has to wear what she brought or what was left at home from when you were in high school.
Yeah, but so, they could online shop.
That's true. But like a custom suit?
That's true.
I feel like that would be hard.
I guess I'm just so
I am intrigued, though.
Unfamiliar with the process of how getting custom suits works in the first place that I don't know how quarantining affects it.
Me neither. I'm pretty sure it still exists, but you might have to like send in like measurements and stuff.
That's true. Well, that's a good startup opportunity if anybody's listening. Start an online custom suit thing. Do you have any predictions of what particular players will be wearing? Like Joe Burrow said, don't make fun of my hair. I don't have a haircut opportunity.
I think everyone doesn't have a haircut opportunity. I wonder if people will have like quarantine beards or like their mom will be like, shave your face.
I hope their moms say shave
I
their
wonder
face.
how many moms we see. Let's say that.
Harley,
We're gonna see so many moms.
Harley. Remember the Baker Mayfield draft vlog?
Oh god, yes.
Like, I hope we get to see that from everyone.
Like a DPJ one.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That'd be so cute. We have go ahead.
I said if DPJ goes somewhere.
Right.
Aww.
Our discussion, okay, so I have 2 discussion questions that we determined as we were outlining this podcast. The first one is what if Shea, and the second one is what of Shea. Thoughts?
Okay, so what of Shea kind of arose from, like, what of Shea? Like, what is he up to? Will he be there? Will he have, like, a camera vlog crew ready to go? Where is he lying right now on discussion boards about quarterbacks in the draft? Because I know everyone's looking at the flashy ones, like the one out of Washington, the one out of Oregon.
I mean, there are a lot of quarterbacks in this class, and Shea is not one
Jalen,
that people talk
Joe
about.
Burrow. I know. Will he go anywhere? Will he be like a Tom Brady-esque and go low, but maybe not have a Tom Brady career? Who is to say? What of Shea?
So basically getting drafted in a late round is what you mean by being a Tom Brady. A Tom Brady without a Tom Brady career.
Yes.
Yeah. What's your scouting report of Shea Patterson? Like, if a GM called you and was like, I forgot to look anything up about Shea Patterson, what's he like? What would you tell him?
I'd be like, he needs to pee the bee better.
And by pee the bee, what do you mean?
Protect the ball.
Okay, I think that one needed some clarification. Yeah, he needs to pee the bee better. Largely underwhelming, but mostly because Michigan fans are just willing to get our hopes up at anything. And when we saw that we had a transfer QB coming in, we thought that everything in the world was going to come together. But now I think we're jaded enough to know that no matter how talented our quarterback is, things will still never go our way. But at the time, we were young and innocent, and we thought, oh my gosh, we're getting a transfer from Ole Miss. Life is good. We're going to have... Our rebuilding years are over, and this is Harbaugh's year to win.
Oh, that was really dumb of us.
Yeah. Do you remember thinking that, though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If he has, like, a random, like, disease or, like, injury and they don't tell you about, and he plays really bad, it's probably because of that.
Oh, that's true.
Or, man, he'll, like, play really well against, like, Notre Dame and, like, MSU and, like...
Yeah, that's true. His whole performance was kind of clouded by, like, random injuries that they never admitted to us until after they healed.
Told us about.
Yeah, they would be like, no, he's not injured, and he'd play really poorly, and then he would have a really good game, and be like, why is he having a really good game? It's like, oh, he just recovered from his injury. So, I don't know. There's so much mystery surrounding Michigan football that I have no idea the level of talent
Maybe
that
that's
any of our
why I
players
was like,
have.
what of Shea? There's just too much mystery.
There's so much mystery. I don't know. I would love for someone to take a chance on him and prove that he's, like, actually really good. Because I feel like he definitely has more in him than what we saw.
I guess that spawned the, like, what if?
What if
What
Shea?
if he gets... Like, what if he gets drafted?
Like, yeah, what if he gets drafted? What if he's actually kind of good? What if he has a quarantine mustache?
Oh, God.
I can't picture him. I'm sorry, his face does not register with my brain. Like, we've talked about this before, I would not recognize him walking down the street. Something about his face just, like, does not, like, my brain doesn't pick it up.
So, what of?
So, yeah, what if Shea? What if Shea? I mean, we pretty much covered it. This is the most in-depth NFL draft podcast you'll ever find out there. Really quickly, I'm just gonna list off the Michigan Wolverines that are entering the NFL draft, just so we can think if we have any last thoughts, and also just so you can know who to watch for. Maybe if you're listening, you're like, oh, I forgot about that guy. Let me think about him. So, we have Josh Metellus, Michael Onwenu, Sean McEwen, Ben Bredesen, Khaleke Hudson, Lavert Hill, Cesar Ruiz, Shea Patterson, Mike Dana, Josh Uche, Jordan Glasgow, John Runyon, Donovan Peoples-Jones. So, honestly, a lot of those guys, I'm like, oh man, this sucks for Michigan. We're losing a lot of these guys.
Good job, man.
Thank you.
I don't really know where, like, any of them are gonna fall, obviously, because draft boarding stuff is not my cup of tea. But I know there's a lot of talk surrounding Cesar Ruiz, and his athleticism and his ability at the center position, so I know that a lot of teams will be interested in him, which is awesome for our program, but it also made me think about, like, oh dang, we had him and now he's gone. I don't know what we're gonna do, because I'm pretty sure the other one transferred away, so I don't know. It made me, like, question a lot of stuff about the O-line again, and I was just like, well, we're back where we started probably at the very beginning of this podcast. Is our O-line is terrible.
I don't remember the context, but a couple weeks ago I texted you, like, well, I said something like, who's your favorite offensive lineman? But no, that wasn't the question. Something about offensive linemen. You're like, I don't think we have any. And I thought about it. I don't think we do. And I was like, oh yeah, we don't. It was like last year when we were trying, you were trying to think of a player on defense, and you're like, Josh Metellus. Now we don't even have him. Obviously not offensive line, but yeah.
No. Well, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, obviously we have people coming in, but, like, it all just seems very bizarre at this moment to be thinking about football, mostly because we're probably not going to be able to watch it, which is really, like, in person, which is really sad.
Yeah, we'll see. We don't know yet, but yeah, it does feel kind of, like, uncomfortable to talk about football stuff when it's just, like, it almost feels like we're just living in this fantasy world, like, pretending it's gonna happen, but it's just, like, this made-up sport that will never actually take place, you know?
Maybe that is what it feels like.
Yeah, it feels like we're talking about, like, characters on a TV show or something. Like, we'll never actually know what they're like.
What if football was just a TV show?
What if it's always been a TV show?
Whoa.
I mean, like, it is on TV.
Welcome to Views, where things become philosophical.
What if it's all just a TV show?
Existential questions.
We have officially lost it. Like, I didn't think that I had lost it until I started trying to record this podcast, and I'm like, oh man, I'm unhinged right now.
Yeah, we've just been having parties.
Yeah. Do we have anything else we need to discuss on this podcast?
I don't really think so. Should we just, like, listen to an interview?
Yeah, maybe.
And then, like, come back together and discuss, like, the greatest draft outfits we find, and, like, if Michigan players went, like, what if and what of.
Ooh, so we'll discuss that next week?
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to you then, Harley dear.
Okay, bye, Hanny.
Bye.
Go Blue.
Go Blue. All right, so we are here with Earl Smith, who is my co-author on the book The Fab Five, the Scrapbook of a The Scrapbook of a Revolution. We're just here to chat a little bit about the Fab Five and their legacy and why he and I both chose to write about them. So thanks for coming on the podcast. Do you want to give us a little bit of an introduction on why you were initially interested in the Fab Five?
Sure, it's a pleasure to be here. I've been kind of sitting here hoping that, I'd get to do this before the world did what it did to us, so I'm really happy to be here. And it's a funny story, and I'll start with this. Have you ever heard of a band called This Will Destroy You?
I have not.
I'm sure you haven't. Nobody has. They do mostly soundtrack music. And so they did some soundtrack music around the time that I did my first basketball book, which was on the Big Five, which is a Philadelphia basketball thing. They did a soundtrack movie for the original Purge movie, which I didn't watch, but I saw the trailer. And they had this really kind of big emotional song that leads into the trailer. And so I was playing around on Google one day and in YouTube and was looking for other uses of that song. It's the exact same song that ESPN used at the end of the Fab Five documentary.
Oh my gosh, that is such a crazy way to start watching that documentary. So then you watched that 30 for 30 and you were hooked?
Yeah, I watched the last 7 minutes of the 30 for 30, and I'm just like, why in the world do I not know more about this? Because, I've got a little bit of history as far as, sports journalism goes. I did some podcasting way back in the day when podcasting was in its infancy. But it was mostly Cincinnati based because I lived in Cincinnati at the time. And so, I was just like, well, I need to watch the other 55 minutes of this. So, I paid for it on Amazon Prime. It was the very first thing I ever bothered to pay for with Prime, because it was just like, well, I got all this free stuff. Why do I need to pay for this? So
right.
I sit
Honestly,
down.
I think that's the only movie I've ever bought on Amazon Prime also.
Well, it's funny. I bought that, and there's a couple things I bought because I teach college. I'm a professor, I guess you could say.
Right.
And so there was a couple movies that I bought to teach a children's literature class. But yeah, that was really the first thing that I was ever going to give Jeff Bezos more money for than what I'd given him initially with Prime membership.
Right.
So I'm sitting there and I watched the documentary, and about 15 minutes in, I'm just like, okay, I know what the next book is that I'm going to write. And it was the Fab Five, and it was just like I had to pour over Mitch's book, and I had to go back and look at the archives that Bentley had, and the deeper I got into it, I was like, there's so much here. And I start looking at dates, and I'm just like, oh, well, it's almost, the 30th anniversary of these guys. So,
right. And not a lot had been done about them besides, Mitch Albom wrote that book, and then Jalen Rose has done that documentary, and he's written his own book, but there hasn't been a lot of new stuff out about them. And at the time, you had no idea that Juwan Howard was going to be head coach at Michigan.
Oh, no, there was no way I could have known that. We spent, gosh, Hannah, 6 months, was it almost? I was teaching at Rowan University at the time. We spent, I think, 6 months trying to figure out who exactly was going to publish it.
Right.
Arcadia was kind of dialing down what they were doing on sports books, and so then we contacted Font Hill, and they did it. And then Arcadia turned around and bought Font Hill. So.
Oh, okay. See, I was confused the whole time. Now I understand what happened. So I was like, did we go back and then forth and then back again? Okay, got it. That makes sense.
It was the funniest, and to be honest, it was kind of my fault in a sense. I do 2 or 3 local and sports history books a year, and Arcadia is just like, well, you're working on these other projects. We don't want you to do this one. And I'm like, but this is a really good one. And they're like, well, we don't want you to do it. I was like, okay, I'll just go do it somewhere else. Right. Little did I know at the time they had access to everything that Font Hill was doing, and they knew that I was working with Font Hill on it, so it all worked out in the end.
That's so funny. That's so funny. But yeah, so right when we were pretty far along in the process when John Beilein announced that he was going to the NBA, and then all of a sudden there was talks about Juwan Howard being the next head coach, and I was kind of like, I honestly, as a Michigan fan, I was like, that would be the coolest thing ever. While writing this book, I was kind of like, oh no, like, I was like, it would be really cool, but like, are we gonna have to like change so much about the book, and like, what is that gonna mean, and all of that. But we ended up ramping up how fast we were writing it and getting it published in time for March Madness this year, which didn't end up happening, but we ended up, we got it published a full year earlier than it was initially going to be published because of Juwan Howard, right?
Right, we were aiming for the 30th anniversary is what we were thinking. And I was like, 18
which is
months
next year.
Right, which is next year. And I'm thinking 18 months is a long time to be working on a book, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting there and they're just like, I knew Juwan was coaching at Miami, for the Heat.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like Juwan Howard under consideration he was actually under consideration for the Lakers job at one point. And
yeah, I think, an assistant coaching job, or was he under consideration for the head coaching job at the Lakers?
Well, they interviewed him, and then they hired Frank Vogel, and then Juwan interviewed again to be one of Vogel's assistants, and then he got offered, to interview for the Michigan job, and I was like, no, this is going to happen, and it happened.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, oh my gosh, and so I called Alan Dutton, who is the acquisitions guy for Font Hill. Great guy. He still works, Font Hill is kind of independent, but part of Arcadia at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I called Alan, and I was like, Alan, we've got to get this out in the next 90 days. I said, Juwan Howard just took the job at Michigan. And he was like, okay, Martin, we're not going to get it out in 90 days. But Alan's this guy from England, so he's got the English accent and everything going on. And so I'm sitting here, and, basketball is not as important in England as it is in the United States, obviously.
Right.
But Alan's just like, well, don't you guys have something called March Mania or something like that? I was like, no, it's March Madness. He goes, oh, well, whatever. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh no, not whatever. So he's like, well, let's get it out for March Mania. And I was like, March Madness. And he's like, okay. So, and then I called you. I was in Tennessee at the time. God, there was so much going on at that time. I was interviewing for my new job. I was trying to get this book out. And I was like, and I call you. And I think it was the first time we'd ever spoken on the phone.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And I was like, Hannah, we have to get this out. We have to do this. And you're like, oh, well, okay. And we got it done.
Yeah, we did. It was a quick turnaround from that point. I mean, we'd had a little while to work on it at that point, but just mentally shifting the deadlines and everything was a pretty big switch. But it was such an interesting book to research and write about, which is why I kind of want to back up a little bit and talk about like who the Fab Five are. I know that my generation, a lot of times we weren't alive for that, and we've heard a lot more about it since Juwan Howard was hired, but it's kind of it's history, I guess. And you said you hadn't heard much about them, just being on, you're out east, and there's a lot that people don't know about the Fab Five. So do you want to give a little, like, bio blurb on who the Fab Five are?
Well, they have to be... and some people try to say Calipari had a better recruiting class when he brought in 7, and I'm just like, no, you're crazy. It's not Calipari. The Fab Five, they are the most dynamic recruiting class in the history of college basketball, bar none. You have a group that comes in, and not only do they come in and they're some of the best basketball players from the high school level in the world, but they're some of the cockiest, some of the brashest. They took the whole Michael Jordan era of trash talk and, ready to be the best, and combined that with some Muhammad Ali, and they went for it. And they, and Mitch Albom has said 100 times that they took college basketball by storm, so I won't steal Mitch's cliche. But they were unlike anything that has come before or since. They, kind of took the usual dynamic of how basketball was played and how basketball players presented themselves, even down to their uniforms, and they changed the landscape of college basketball. And I think college basketball is better for it. I think they kind of helped set up what basketball was going to be like at the end of the Jordan years, because Jordan was a very distinct personality. He was larger than life. I mean, he even loomed over the early years of Shaq and the twilight of guys like Hakeem Olajuwon and players like that. And they were kind of there to fill the void. I mean, everything that is applicable to college basketball today, hip-hop and rap culture that goes into college basketball, trash talking, all of that, can find its roots with the Fab Five.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting thing to point out, because it can be difficult to explain exactly what was so controversial about the Fab Five at the time. And I think that's because everything that they did that was controversial or revolutionary, however you want to put it, at that time is now commonplace, and that's because they normalized it. So the baggy uniforms that they wore, I mean, we saw in the Jordan documentary last night, like, that was not common before, and now they're getting a little bit shorter again, thanks to Michigan once again. But the black socks, that was Ray Jackson's idea. Just so many facets. I mean, trash talking in general, so many facets. Oh, and being a one and done, none of them were one and dones, but Chris Webber was a 2 and done, and that was unheard of at the time. That's pretty common now. It might become less common with the new G League rules, but things like that, it's difficult to explain exactly the effect they had on college basketball, because if you explain it to someone my age, they're doing exactly what's considered normal in college basketball, but they were just the first ones to do it.
Oh, absolutely. And the way I look at it too, they're revolutionary for 100 different reasons. But one of the big things, and not a lot of people talk about this or want to talk about this, we're on the path of the NCAA is going to have to break down and rightfully, I say, start compensating players for what they're doing, for these universities. And Chris Webber was kind of the impetus for that. I won't get into whether Chris was right or wrong or what was going on, but when you're taking people and you're pulling them out of environments where they're shrouded in poverty, and they go into these environments where they're making thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars for these institutions, and they're trying to figure out how to feed themselves, And, being a college athlete requires a lot of food. You're using your body. You've got to have fuel, much less anything else that goes into it. You have to question the fairness of it. And I think above all else, that is one of the big issues that comes out of the Fab Five is how is it fair to not compensate somebody for their labor? And granted, the argument would be, well, they're getting a free college education. But look at the graduation rates. I mean, across all schools, this is not Michigan or, any other institution in particular. Mm-hmm. Although Big Ten schools do tend to have a little bit higher graduation rates than the SEC especially. But I can say that I'm from Tennessee, so. But that's what we're looking at. They did change that landscape. It's something that we have to consider, and we have to start asking ourselves the hard questions. Ethically, is it right to take somebody and exploit their labor and not compensate them fairly? And I don't think it has been. And I think that's going to be long after trash talking is what it is, which I love, long after uniforms change 1,000 times because they always do. We're going to be looking at some real-world implications that were brought on by these five, and that's one of the biggest ones for me.
Right, definitely. I mean, that's a huge conversation right now because we have players like Jalen Green and probably Isaiah Todd going straight to the G League, so that might change that conversation once again, especially if the NBA were to end the one-and-done rule, which it doesn't look like they're going to do because they are creating this new G League team specifically for players straight out of high school, which is interesting. I think we'll see how that plays out. But right now, players don't really have much of a choice besides playing in the NCAA or going overseas. So yeah, that is a really interesting conversation. And for people who aren't aware that the storyline and what the Fab Five has to do with that, shortly after their time at Michigan, I think maybe were the trials in like 2000, 2001, something like that?
2001, 2002, somewhere around that area. Yep.
Okay, so sometime around then, Chris Webber and Jalen Rose were both tried for taking money from a Michigan booster during their time at Michigan, which is obviously illegal under the current amateur model of the NCAA. So Chris Webber was found guilty and also for lying, and it was a whole mess. And the Fab Five was disassociated from Michigan for a while. That's why the banners are taken down. So yeah, that's definitely a huge conversation when it comes down to the conversation around paying college athletes. And there are also just a ton of anecdotes in Mitch Albom's book in particular where, or maybe this was in the documentary, I'm not completely sure, but Chris Webber's walking down the street, he goes to M-Den and he sees his jersey for sale, and it's sold out or everyone's buying it, and then he goes to the sandwich shop across the street and he doesn't have enough money to buy a sandwich. So those conversations are just super, super interesting, especially because the Fab Five were some of the first college basketball players to really be cultural icons and be pop culture figures and kind of building a brand around themselves. You see that a lot now with players like Zion Williamson, but that wasn't as much of a thing in college basketball before that. That was mostly just in the NBA.
Right. And yeah, I remember one of the stories that Mitch told in the documentary, I think it was the documentary, was that Chris was always asking for money to get pizza or something, Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting here thinking, and this was even back in the early 90s when basketball was just starting to become the pop culture sensation that it was, that it is now. And I'm sitting here thinking these guys are playing in front of sold out arenas. They're at one of, the university's endowment is what, $2 or $3 billion. It's insane how much money universities in general have, and they're having to beg for food. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, that's what the story is, and that was one thing that I think you and I talked about it when we first started writing this book. We mentioned some of this stuff, but the focus for me was never, okay, Chris and Jalen don't get along all the time, or Chris had to plead guilty to this, or, that or whatever. It was trying to focus on the basketball, but then as I got deeper into writing this, I was like, well, they're kind of interchangeable. You have to talk about both of them. You're doing a disservice to the story if you don't talk about both of them.
Definitely. They were, as people, they were subversive in every way in starting all these conversations that maybe other people were afraid to have or didn't think to have, but because they were so young and confident and just the types of people to say what they thought, all of that stuff is intertwined.
Absolutely.
Do you have a personal favorite story about the Fab Five?
The crack house story with Jalen is always one of my favorite stories.
Go ahead and tell that story for people who aren't familiar.
So I believe 2 days before they were supposed to play Illinois at Illinois in Jalen's sophomore year. It was the second season. Jalen was hanging out with some friends, and they came in. They did a police raid, and Jalen was sitting on the couch playing video games, and apparently somebody had sold a tiny bit of crack out of the back of the room. So they charge everybody because of some arcane, war on drugs law with being at a crack house and, being part of distribution. And then Jalen's charges get dropped later on when it's obvious he was just there playing video games. And it's funny because Jalen always had a reputation of being a really clean-cut dude. Not so much that, he was never in trouble. He was always, doing the things that he was supposed to do. He was a tough guy and came from a very rough part of America. But he was never in trouble, There was never anything attached to Jalen before that. And so they go to play Illinois, and the kids in Illinois were just, it was racism is what it was in a lot of ways, and they're chanting crack house, and that was one of the nicest things that they were chanting at Jalen during this game. And I think he blew up for something like 38 points. It was his career high while he was at Michigan, and I think that Illinois was ranked higher than Michigan going into the game, and I think Michigan beat them by 20 points or something like that. It was just, and I could be wrong on that aspect of it, but I know Jalen blew up. And had his career game, and all the while he's sitting there laughing because, he knows he's not been in a crack house or had anything to do with that. But it showed the character of Jalen as an individual and of these guys as a group. You could sit there and chant whatever you wanted to do whatever you wanted at them. They were usually going to beat your heroes and make you watch. So.
Right. And also, that's just so stupid. Like, you just don't know Jalen Rose or any of the Fab Five guys well if you think that, like, that's going to get into their heads. Like, if anything, that's just going to motivate them. They love trash talk. Like, you're playing them in their own game at that point. That's, like, I just think it's so funny. That's so, like, yeah, Jalen Rose just, like, eats that stuff up. Like, I'm sure it's no coincidence that he had a career game that day.
And it's hilarious because if you look at Jalen's body of work as a whole, I was watching an outtake on Get Up this morning that had Jalen in it. And the Michael Jordan documentary came out yesterday. And everybody is going on, and the Michael versus LeBron debate started back up.
Of course.
and Jalen's talking about it, and he's just like, well, LeBron's not even on the Mount Rushmore of basketball. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, Jalen, I hate what you're saying, but the way that you're saying it has me halfway convinced.
And that's Jalen Rose. He can say anything and get away with it. I love Jalen Rose. I don't know if you've read his book. It's really fun. You can read it in a couple hours. It's not dense or anything, but he gives his, like, manual on how to trash talk and all of that. It's just so Jalen. It's so funny.
Well, and the funny thing about Jalen is even when it backfires on him, like it did with Kobe Bryant in the 81-point game, he twists it. I don't want to say twist it, but he manages to make it something that's enjoyable, even though it was probably one of the most miserable moments of his life. He was doing the pilot for the TV show that he did for ESPN, and there's that scene where he walks in, and Kobe's sitting at the table, and he had said something bad about Kobe in an interview prior, or said Kobe wasn't one of the top 10 greatest of all time or something like that. And Kobe's sitting there at the table, and the waiter walks up, and the waiter goes, "Do you guys want anything?" And Jalen's like, "I don't want anything." And Kobe's like, "I'll take a martini with olives." And the waiter goes, "How many?" And Kobe looks at the waiter and goes, 81. And it pans to Jalen, and he's got this look on his face like he has just died inside. And Kobe sits there and holds it, and then, it's like 30 seconds, and you're like, God, this is uncomfortable for me, and I wasn't even at the game. And finally, Kobe looks at the waiter and goes, "No, I'm just kidding, too."
That is so funny.
And so,
I haven't heard that story before. That's really funny.
I'll have to send you the clip. It's absolutely hilarious. But it just goes to show that, when it's time to be serious, Jalen can be serious, but he knows how to market. He knows how to, and that's one thing that I'll say too. I don't think these guys get enough credit for, they're brilliant, above and beyond everything else that they did. I mean, even after they left Michigan and left professional basketball, I mean, Jalen's on ESPN and Chris is on TNT and Juwan's the head coach at Michigan.
Yeah.
these guys didn't just come to school to play basketball, which is a trope that's often put on, college players, is that, they're just here to play basketball. And there's often racist overtones that go into that. The Fab Five has made themselves into something tangible above and beyond, just the time that they spent at the university.
Definitely. Their personalities, I mean, Jalen Rose in particular, I just love Jalen Rose, but his personality is just, he's just Jalen Rose. There's no other way to put it. And Juwan Howard, too, obviously, we love him, have always loved him, but even more so since he became the head coach at Michigan. It's just been great to see him and his poise in the press conferences and everything. They're just the kinds of guys that you want to have representing your school.
Absolutely. And you look at some of the problems that major college sports has had, and I'll go all the way back. And it seems like the Big Ten got bit hard, aside from the cheating scandal at Duke, or was it North Carolina? It was one of those two schools, and they ended up not getting in any trouble for it at all. But you look at some of the stuff that went on with Ohio State and Jim Tressel, and then you turn around and some of the stuff that went on with Ohio State with Urban Meyer here recently, who I cannot stand.
I'm with you.
Well, see, I lived in Ohio for 12 years, and God, if I have to go back again, it'll be too soon. Aside from the fact that my kids live there. And then, everything that went on with Paterno at Penn State, and I still think Penn State got off light on this. And yet you look at that, and then you look at some of the grief that the Fab Five went through while they were at Michigan, and the power imbalance there is just ridiculous. But the way that these guys handled it is just remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable.
That's honestly a really good point. With the legitimate scandals that other schools, I mean, not to say that Michigan is better or different, because who knows what goes on behind closed doors, but the things that have come out about other schools that have maybe gotten swept under the rug, and then just the controversy that the Fab Five faced for not really doing anything controversial is really, really interesting to note that contrast.
Well, and it goes back into structures of power. You look at Urban Meyer, you look at Jim Tressel, you look at Joe Paterno. Those are the guys that are in charge. They're these straight, white, usually Protestant males that are in charge of big-time college athletics. And then you have five guys that come in from poorer parts of America, obviously black kids. They come in and they decide to write their own narratives, and that's all of a sudden when the Bowers of B have a problem with it. And I think that speaks a lot to that kind of culture. Right. And it still goes on to this day. I'll give you a perfect example. Being from the South myself, I watch a lot of NASCAR, or I did, and I kind of follow it occasionally. And so with everything that's been going on with the coronavirus pandemic, they have been racing online through a platform called iRacing. So all the drivers get in there, and they've got, it's digital, but, they've got these huge $40,000 rigs in their living room that simulated actually being in a car.
Oh, that's
It's fascinating to watch because it's almost like watching a race. The graphics are that good. But a couple of weeks ago, there's one African-American driver, one black driver in NASCAR. His name's Bubba Wallace. And he wrecked in the race, and instead of fixing his car, he just quit. And then his sponsor fired him because he quit in a simulated race on a digital platform. And I'm sitting here thinking, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. A week later, another NASCAR driver, he's of Japanese American descent, his name's Kyle Larson, was on a live stream on the same platform and dropped the N-word.
Mm-hmm. Oh my
with
gosh.
with a hard R now. Not that it's okay in any circumstance for any person that's white to say that, but this was with a hard R. I mean, this was horrible, and there was people defending him. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so if a guy quits a video game, that's a problem. But if a guy comes in and drops the hard R, well, he deserves a second chance. I can kind of see really where this is going. I can see what the dynamic actually is here. Bubba Wallace is a black driver, and Kyle Larson is not, and that's the problem.
Yeah, that's disturbing.
And the racism that these guys had to go, and this was back in the early 90s, they were getting letters from alums that were just vicious.
Yeah, and those are the alums who hide behind a letter. Like, it's just it's very disturbing, and you hope that it's a vocal minority, and rather than, I mean, any amount is horrible, but you hope that it's a vocal minority and that that's not the majority of the feedback they were getting. But yeah, it just does show that the stuff that's institutionalized into our society is very, very messed up.
Absolutely, and it saddens me because the legacy of these five should be that they were some of the most entertaining college basketball players to ever step on the court. Even the bad things that happened, even the timeout, even some of the other stuff that went down, it was entertaining. They were great basketball players. They were on an entirely different level as entertainers. And to Steve Fisher's credit, he let them be themselves, and that's why they were as successful as they were. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of their legacy gets taken away because of some of this silly nonsense.
Yeah, I will say though, as a Michigan fan, a Michigan homer, someone who's grown up in the Ann Arbor area, that is the legacy that I have heard of them my entire life, and it wasn't until I started doing a deep dive into them for this book, and just because I've been obsessed with them for a couple of years now, that I learned about the racism that they faced, and that might be, a privilege that I have, like, masking me, but at least from what people have told me, luckily, what I've heard my entire life is they were some of the most entertaining basketball players, and we're so lucky that they went to Michigan. So hopefully that legacy is carrying on in most people's minds.
Well, and look, you've got 3 of the 5 have a legitimate shot one way or another to end up in the Naismith Hall of Fame. I think Chris Webber, as a player, his accolades speak for themselves. Guy averaged a double-double professionally for his entire career. He's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I think Jalen, if you combine his playing career where he was successful, 6th Man of the Year, a couple All-Star appearances, if you combine that with his work as an analyst on ESPN, he's done a ton for the game of basketball. He belongs in the Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. And then Juwan Howard played for 20 years, won 2 rings, signed at the time the richest contract in NBA history, and now he's the head coach at one of the most illustrious. That's a double grammar thing, by the way. So just ignore that. Sorry, English professor stepped back in. He has an illustrious career, and he's coaching at Michigan. He's coaching at Michigan.
Yeah.
The prodigal son comes back home, and Juwan's not the prodigal son at all, but I think that went a long way towards rehabilitating whatever negative image that the Fab Five have. But he belongs in the Hall of Fame on those accolades.
Definitely. It's
incredible, and Jimmy King said it himself. His role in the Fab Five probably cost him better success in the NBA. And Ray Jackson, I cannot say enough about Ray Jackson. And I think it's unfortunate that he's kind of seen as the fifth wheel of this whole deal. But he was a remarkable high school basketball player. He had success overseas playing basketball. And now the guy works as a mentor for people that want to jump from the high school level to the college in basketball down in Texas. I mean, it's an incredible human being. I remember about a week after, and I found this out later, I didn't know about it till well after we were into this writing process, but a week after we signed the contract, they did an appearance. It was Jalen, Jimmy King, and Ray Jackson did an appearance at a casino in Connecticut. And I was in Connecticut at the time, and I didn't go. I didn't know they were there. And I regretted that because it was just like, how awesome would it have been to see those kind of icons in person?
Yeah, that would have been really cool. They did a conference my freshman year at Michigan, and I wasn't able to go to that either, but I wish I would have.
Well, and it's just like, well, I have a book now with my name on the cover. Well, our name's on the cover. Let's be fair about it. And I want them to sign it. I want to get that signed and frame it in my house and hang it up next to all the Star Trek stuff that I have hanging around and everything else because, their legacy, they could take all the banners away that they want. They can say whatever they want to say about the trash talking, the uniforms, taking money, whatever. It doesn't matter. Their legacy is untouchable, in my view. And it always will be.
I agree. On that note, I think we've been talking for a little while now. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I always love talking about the Fab Five. It's been great talking to you. Anything you want to plug in the podcast? I mean, obviously everyone should buy the book. It's available wherever you buy books. Sometimes it's sold out, sometimes it's not. You just got to keep checking back.
Well, and that's what
books or other things you want to plug on here?
Well, that's one thing I want to say about the book too. It went through its printing twice in the first 2 weeks, so I mean the love for the Fab Five is absolutely still there. I've written some other things. I did one on the Philadelphia Big Five, which is an interesting read from the same publishing company, kinda, in that roundabout sense. I do a lot of local history stuff. I'm going to start working on one about the Crosstown Shootout, which is University of Cincinnati and Xavier University in Cincinnati.
Oh, cool.
Which will probably be out in the next 18 months or so. But, yeah, I mean, go get the book. I mean, the book's great. Enjoy it. Hannah, I cannot say enough. You did an incredible job working on this book. It was such a seamless process. You're a wonderful writer and a wonderful ambassador for the history of the University of Michigan.
Well, thank you. And, yeah, same to you. It was great talking to you.